And so the good girl, bad girl machine is actually less good, mostly bad, boy or girl, and therefore deserves a big red X. What's up guys, Jeff Cavalier, ATHLEAN-X.com. What you see behind me is a bunch of different gym machines, many of which I get asked about all the time, whether or not they're worth your time or really just worth holding your dirty gym towel. Well, today I'm going to help you to decide which ones are the best and which ones you could pretty much throw in the trash. We're going to rank them from worst to best. Let's get going, we got a lot to cover. Now first, it's important to point out the criteria for our rankings. First and foremost, is the exercise actually providing a benefit? Does it provide something unique or an advantage that's better than what you're currently doing, let's say with free weights? Because if it does, it's going to rank higher. Secondly, is it biomechanically safe? In other words, does the exercise accommodate most people and most people's body types? If it's instead trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, which is your body, then it's likely not going to rank high on this list. And of course, as always, if there are opportunities here to educate you on to how to make some of these exercises just a little bit better with some small tweaks, I'm going to take advantage and do that for you too. So with that said, let's get to the first and the worst category. Now when it comes to hamstring training, there's a lot of different machines. Actually, a lot of different hamstring curl machines. But I'm going to make your job a lot easier because I'm going to help to eliminate one of them from your options. And that's the lying hamstring curl, which is probably the most popular. The issue I have with this machine is, as a physical therapist, I believe it leads to the most low back issues when you perform it, because you're performing it from this hip flexed position. And what happens here is, as you're trying to move the weight, especially as they get heavier and heavier, you're going to drive your knees or thighs down into the pad, further promoting isometric hip flexion, which is going to pull on your low back and oftentimes lead to that low back pain I talked about. With so many better options available, I say let's pass on this and instead give it the big red X as the first and the worst in our gym machine rankings. Now, if these rankings were based on Instagram popularity, this next exercise would actually be the runaway winner, but it's not. It's based on effectiveness. And for that reason, it's going to also go down here in the bottom of the list, and we're talking about the good girl, bad girl exercises. Now, I don't have to go into the science of how these exercises actually got their name, Jesse, but we do want to talk about the science of how we're trying to build muscle when we do these exercises. And for me, if anybody tells you they're trying to build their glute max, then they're focusing on the wrong exercise, and they simply don't understand the function of this one, because this is actually targeting abduction, which is more of a glute medius function. Now, even that's not really that great because you're not performing it correctly if you're sitting down and limiting your range of motion. Instead, what you should be doing is propping yourself up like this, turning your foot out to get some hip external rotation, and then keeping that posteriorly rotated, hip elevated position throughout the exercise. And when it comes to the good girl exercise, there's just so many better ways to train the adductors that are far more functional. And it starts with putting you on your feet and doing something like a slide board lunge. The fact is, being on your feet is always going to train your hips more functionally in the frontal plane, so sitting on your ass like this is not going to be my favorite choice, and therefore, good or bad, boy or girl, this is going to get the second big red X in our rankings. Next, we have a machine that may not be in everyone's gym, but it's in enough of them to have me raise the red flag and get you to focus on something else, and it's the side lateral machine. Now, the idea here is there's only one small thing wrong, but that small thing, to me, is really big, because it messes with the biomechanics of the exercise. And we're talking about the fixed hand placement, not allowing for external rotation at the shoulder. I tell you all the time, we're not pouring pitchers when we do the lateral raise with dumbbells, and we're certainly not going to do it here either. And even though this helps you get to a more neutral grip, I'd rather see that thumb end higher than the pinky to give you enough clearance in the shoulder to prevent any shoulder pain that could come from using the exercise. I think you can skip this one, guys. There's so many better options. This ain't one of them. So for me, it's going to get another big red X. Now, if there's one exercise that's blown more biceps than a deadlift, then it's the preacher curl, especially when the machine is designed like this. You see, the preacher curl puts your bicep in a very vulnerable position when the pad is angled pretty flat like this, because the elbow becomes the fulcrum and the overload can quickly surpass what you're capable of lifting. In that case, you've also got a seat there, inviting you to sit, only making that situation worse. So instead, either ditch the exercise or find one that allows you to do this. Stand up and lean with your elbows into a downward sloping pad. What this does is it changes the entire mechanics of the exercise, allowing me to drive my triceps or my elbows into the back of the pad, creating some additional assistance from the lats that will help to stabilize the exercise even with heavy loads, give me all the benefits I'm looking for, but without the risk. But for now, if you got a machine like this, I say skip it and instead put another big red X in the preacher curl. Now, I've gone on record maybe once or 100 times about being an anti-fly guy. But the fact of the matter is, as a physical therapist, it's just not the best thing you can do to your anterior shoulder capsule. Now, what would I say about a chest fly machine? Well, ironically, it may not be the worst thing that you can do, but it's definitely not the right thing for everybody. You can see Jesse doing the exercise here and note that it does have stops at the bottom range of motion, preventing excessive abduction of the arms away from the body. That being said, not everybody's going to have that safety net, because if you have a bigger body, a bigger chest, more of a barrel chest, you're going to have more depth, range of motion, and not find the support that Jesse's finding here, which would make the exercise no better than the unsupported version that we do on a bench. And therefore, it's not the worst thing if it fits your body type, but it still deserves that run X, just maybe a little bit smaller than the others. And so with the worst of the worst out of the way, I now get to break out my blue marker as I move into the better category. Not perfect, but definitely better. And when we talk about the hamstring curl variations, we have something that's definitely better. We're talking about the standing hamstring curl. Now, first of all, I get to put you on your feet. And even though the working leg is in the air, it's the benefit to the stance leg that provides additional functional carryover. That being said, I can also help to discourage some of that hip flexor involvement that we had in the lying down version, because I can tell you to stand not upright, but to lean forward a little bit, which in the standing variation actually discourages some of that hip flexor involvement that we talked about before. It allows for a more isolated hamstring flexion here, again, taking off some of that strain on the low back. The idea is two factors stand out as bigger benefits than the lying down version, and that's why we're going to give the standing hamstring curl the first in the better category with our big blue circle. Next up in the better category, we have a row machine. And the reason why this is not higher is because actually the arms are not higher. I'd rather you find one like a hammer pull-down machine that starts and stops with your arms in a much higher position. Here you're going to get a better stretch on the lats, and what also happens is you don't get that almost caving that's promoted by this variation of the machine. It sort of drives you down and in, or your shoulders wrapped around the pad, giving your chest very little opportunity to stand proud and allowing you to get a good lat contraction. So when it comes to this row, it's certainly not a no, but it's not going to get the best endorsement. So for me, it's just going to get a modest blue circle, knowing that there's better row variations ahead. Next up is a machine that I don't see as often today as I used to. However, we know this guy's got a little bit of social influence, so likely the more he posts himself using it, more gyms are likely to start stocking it. We're talking about the seated tricep dip. It's actually a good machine, one that's good for replacing the bench dip bodyweight version of the exercise. And I actually love that version of the exercise, but all too often, as I pointed out many times, people can do it and put their shoulders in a very compromised position. The bench dip machine actually prevents that. However, if you have access to this machine, this is slightly different biomechanically. It's basically putting your arms back into extension more than what was happening with the first version. You can see here the difference side by side. In Sam's version, his arms are out in front of his body in the contracted position, and here in Jesse's version, he's actually getting into that neutral or slightly extended position, which is going to more effectively target the long head. Each way, though, these machines actually are somewhat of an improvement over the bodyweight version of the dip, and therefore could be a good addition to your routine. So the seated tricep dip will get another of the blue circles in the better category. And again, Jesse's version might bump it up one notch to even better still. Next up, we have an exercise that proves once again that popularity doesn't always equal best. And we're talking about a popular leg exercise machine, perhaps no more than the leg press. The problem here with the leg press is it has its limitations. First and foremost, don't be fooled by the amount of plates that you can stack on the ends of this machine, because a lot of times you're just what I call leaning on your ligaments, or in some cases just shortening your range of motion so badly that you're being fooled into thinking that you're performing more work than you are. On top of that, even the biomechanics of the exercise are not very good. If you were to take the position your body's in at the bottom of that leg press and simply rotate yourself to a, quote, standing position like you would be in a squat, it doesn't look like a very good squat, does it? On top of that, people use the machine oftentimes for glute development, not realizing that you don't even come close to full hip extension and therefore not good glute activation by doing the exercise. So while it's popular and while it does give you some benefits and doesn't belong in the worst category, it simply is not that great, and therefore it's just going to get a modest blue circle in the better category. And so we wrap up our better category with a machine that definitely needs to at least earn some points for its versatility, considering the fact that you can do bench press, shoulder press, squats, rows, shrugs, and a whole host of other exercises on it. And we're talking about the Smith machine. Now, I've gone over the issues with the Smith machine before, particularly as it pertains to people using it for squats. You see, a lot of people like to do this exercise, in particular this way, leaning back against the bar, but it instantly disqualifies normal biomechanics in the process. In other words, when you squat, You rely on dorsiflexion at the ankle, the bending of the ankle up that happens by performing the squat freestanding in space. When your legs are out in front of you like this, you're getting plantar flexion, which does not put the normal ground reaction forces up through your knee and through your hip, and it forces your body to move in ways it should not. When we look at upper body exercises, be aware of the fact that if you're doing, let's say, a shoulder press and find that you're much stronger on it this way, realize that you're not just pushing straight up into the bar like you would in a freestanding overhead press, but you're also pushing into the bar, leveraging it up overhead. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it's certainly not maximizing the pure strength of your shoulders, and it's deceiving you into thinking that you're stronger than you are. All in all, like I said, you can't knock the versatility of the machine, but a machine that requires your body to adapt to it because of those fixed tracks is not going to get the optimal rating, and so for me, it's going to get the blue circle as good, but not great. Next, we break out the yellow marker to move into the even better still category, and here we're going to kick it off with a basic shoulder press. Now, pretty much every gym is going to have a shoulder press machine. Each one's going to have slight variations. This one in particular I like because you can see the arms actually start to approximate or come closer to each other as you press up overhead. And this is good because it gives you some of that joint stacking of the wrist over the elbow over the shoulder that makes the exercise more comfortable for those that have shoulder issues. Which gets even better when you take advantage of the alternate grip that places your hands in a more neutral position that makes that joint stacking even easier at the top. That being said, I don't like when you push yourself back into the pad. So even though the pad is there for you, ideally it's best if you could just slide yourself an inch or two away from it so you don't disrupt the biomechanics of your shoulder blades by pushing them back into the pad while you press up. That said, there are better versions of shoulder press machines that we're going to get to later, but for now, let's put the first of the yellow circles around the shoulder press in the better still category. Next up, we get an exercise that actually matches popularity with its utility and function, and we're talking about the pec deck, and it belongs in the better still category because number one, it's versatile. So we obviously know it as the chest exercise, but we can turn it into the rear delt exercise, which none of us do enough work for, or also the single-sided rear delt exercise, which again, none of us do enough work for. So it has its benefits. On top of that though, when you get in the machine, make sure you're doing it the right way. Don't reach all the way back behind you, which could compromise your shoulder health. Instead, rotate your body to grab one handle at a time, and on dismount, do the same exact thing in reverse, maintaining the health of the exercise and allowing us to put a yellow circle around it in the better still category. Next up in the better still category is a slight improvement on that seated row machine. This time it's something we call the humbler. It actually gets its name from the fact that you're not going to use a lot of weight here, but you are going to overload your back in a safe way because it's a chest supported row variation. If you have any low back issues and it sort of hums on you when you're trying to do a barbell row, this would be a good alternative. The one key difference here of why it gets a slight upgrade is the position of the legs. They're straight and you're face down. You see, when you do the seated row, I talked about it almost wanting to pull your body forward. This actually promotes full body extension, right? If you were going to cheat this exercise, you'd likely squeeze your glutes together, try to extend maybe a little bit the low back, try to lift yourself off the pad to pull the weight up. Well, that's actually a good cheat. That's a cheat that promotes good biomechanics in the upper body by getting your shoulder blades back and your chest proud to get a better row. So if anything, this cheat built into this exercise is going to be a more effective one than the one we talked about before. So it's going to give it a slight leg up and earn its better still ranking for back row variations. So when gym owners decide what machines to put in their gym, at the very top of the list almost always is a chest machine, or two, or three. But you know what? They're actually really good. And it doesn't matter whether it's a chest press or an incline press, there's some unique benefits here. The first and foremost, you don't have to be afraid to fail. If you're doing a barbell bench press with free weights, you're going to have to consider whether or not you have to go lighter, stop short of failure, or make sure you have a good spotter. The second benefit is the machines actually promote proper alignment of the arms during the bench press. We know that the elbows should be tucked around 45 or 60 degrees, but it's a little bit hard to judge or get that right when we're doing a free weight version of the exercise. But here, because of the angled handles, your elbows will actually naturally find that proper position and therefore give you a healthier, safer press. I have no problems with bench press machines, and almost every single time I find myself in a gym on vacation, I always look for one just to give me something new. This is why they're going to fall into the better still category, whatever variation you try. There's no denying that the hack squat has its place when it comes to machine training. That being said, the reverse hack squat isn't my favorite version of it. You see, when you invert your body like this, it allows for more effective targeting of the glutes because you get that more leaned forward position of the body. However, you never truly finish through full hip extension kind of falls into the same category as the leg press, where we really never get back into that hip extension to fully contract the glutes or train them to their best. For that reason, though I like the hack squat and we'll find a better version of it later, the reverse one is a better still option, and therefore it's going to stay right here where it is. So despite my personal rocky relationship with this next exercise, it's not going to sway me from giving you the right recommendation when it comes to where you should rank this machine. And we're talking about the leg extension. You see, if you're looking for an exercise that can create hypertrophy in your quads in a more isolated or targeted way, the leg extension machine provides you that opportunity. However, it's not meant for every person. For instance, the compression forces at the top of every single repetition could become problematic for someone that has patellar tracking dysfunction or patellar femoral syndrome. That's going to cause some pain and discomfort just doing the exercise. Secondly, if you have patellar tendonitis or quadricep tendonitis, you're certainly not going to have a great time doing the exercise. Why? Because in an inflamed state, a tendon actually has 1/5 the capacity to handle the weight that it normally can. And likely, if you're trying to create hypertrophy or growth in the quads, you're probably using some pretty heavy weights to do that. Now, you could use this exercise in a more rehabilitative sense and actually accommodate those tendons to stress, but you're going to have to be prepared to back the weights way down and start working your way back up from the ground up. So I'm not saying it's not a great exercise, it's just not a great exercise for everybody, and for that reason, it's going to get its earned ranking here as a better still option with the big yellow circle. And with that, I get to break out my green marker as I now move up into the almost best category. And to lead off this category, I have one of my favorite machines. It's one I actually have here in my gym, and it's the functional trainer. And if we want to talk about versatility, this is the king. Because you're able to do things like curls, tricep pushdowns, my favorite face pulls, maybe even a side lateral raise. The one limitation here is that it's not a great option for leg exercises because you're simply not going to be able to load the leg exercises up enough to make it worth your time. However, you do need some level of experience when you're going to use this machine because the freedom of movement of these arms allows you to basically recreate any exercise movement pattern that you want, which is a great thing. But if you're not really familiar with how to manipulate these arms in space to get the right exercise effect, then maybe it has its drawbacks. But if you do have an idea of what you're trying to accomplish, this machine will allow you to do it, and for that reason, it's going to get the first of the green circles here in the almost best category. Continuing on in the almost best category, we now have a better version of the shoulder press. This here is called the Viking press. And the main advantage of this versus the other two that I shared with you so far is the fact that you're on your feet. I always say if you want to look like an athlete, you got to train like an athlete. Being on your feet is more athletic than sitting on your ass, and for me, doing this variation of the press is going to be better because of that. The nice thing again is you have the alteration of the handles that allows for a more neutral grip position if your shoulders are bothering you for any reason. But the fact that you've got that freedom of shoulder blade motion that we don't have to deal with in the seated versions, and the fact that you can actually turn this into a more explosive total body exercise by driving with your legs is not only the reason why it belongs in the almost best category, but also I went out and bought this piece of equipment to convert my regular Olympic bar into the machine so I could basically do these at home. The idea though is it belongs in the almost best category, and it's the reason why it gets the big green circle. So we've discussed a couple row variations, but neither of them have lived up to the ranking of almost best like this next exercise does. And this is the seated cable row. And the reason why I love it is it actually reinforces the number one requirement for an effective back exercise, and that is the ability to move your chest or sternum forward or make your chest proud while you do the exercise. Why is this important? Because doing so allows for the most extension at the shoulder during those back exercises that ultimately leads to the best engagement and back contraction. The front to back freedom of movement of your torso in this exercise, unlike the last two we covered, is the reason why we are able to do this so effectively. Throw in the fact that we have the versatility of being able to hit different areas of our back depending upon where we carry our elbows during the exercise, and it gets even better. Keep them nice and tight and low, you're going to work more of the lats. Keep them up high and wide, you're going to work more of the upper back thickness. The idea is the seated cable row is my favorite row, and it belongs up here in the almost best category. When it comes to leg machines designed to more effectively target the quads, for me, there's none better than the hack squat. Now, the nice thing about this is it actually gives you an alternative to the front squat. And we know that the front squat does a good job of targeting the quads, but it's not the most comfortable for many, especially if you lack wrist mobility. The hack squat takes care of that by maintaining a perfectly upright torso throughout the exercise. Now, the big difference between this and that sort of manipulated squat done on the Smith machine is the foot biomechanics are much better here because of the tilted foot plate. That tilted foot plate will actually encourage the normal dorsiflexion at the ankle, which will promote normal biomechanics at the knee and hip, making it not only a good option, but a safe one too. That's why the hack squat deserves its rightful place up here in the almost best category. And so with that, I now worked my way all the way up to the top in the best of the best category. And when it comes to these exercises, remember, the reason why they're here is because these exercise machines either provide a unique advantage that actually we don't get unless we use these machines, or they're allowing us to do these exercises in an even safer way for more and more people to be able to do them. And for me, the first one here is going to be the belt squat. And the reason for that is it allows everybody to experience the benefits of the king of all exercises, the squat. You see, with the belt squat, even if you had back issues, you can free yourself from those because you don't have to deal with the compression that you might get from the bar on your back. At the same time, you don't have to compromise the amount of weight that you're using on the exercise. As a matter of fact, your hands give you the opportunity to self-spot and work yourself through or grind through some of the repetitions that you might not be able to do freestanding in a squat rack. Throw in the fact that the belt positioning itself almost perfects your squat form on its own, putting your pelvis in the right position on every single rep. It solved the issue of knee to hip flexion that a lot of us deal with that causes us to have a not so perfect squat. For all these reasons, this is one of those exercises that if you have access to it, you really should start to incorporate it. And for me, it's going to get the first little green star or whatever that looks like in the best of the best category. And so when it came to hamstrings, we talked about the lying hamstring curl and the standing hamstring curl. But for me, the one that belongs at the very top of the list is the seated hamstring curl. And the big difference here, as you can imagine, is we're decreasing the involvement of those hip flexors, allowing us to focus on that knee flexion component of the hamstring function without having to have those hip flexors start to warp our low back. A nice built-in function here is you could take yourself not just to failure, but nicely through some partial repetitions, and also in a sort of 2-to-1 eccentric overload fashion too, by simply dropping down with 2 legs and then rising up with just 1. There's just a lot of versatility built in here, but most of all, it's the safety that I like about this variation, so it's going to get another one of those jagged green stars as it belongs up here in the best of the best category. Now look, I get it. If you're like most, you relegate your calf work to the end of your workout. But here, relegating it to the end of this video means that we're putting a calf exercise in the best of the best category, and for me, it's the standing calf raise. And once again, this is a machine that just does what it does really good. In other words, if you want to do heavy calf raises, you're going to have to load up that bar. And rather than trying to perform it in a freestanding rack with some plates under your ankles, this just puts you in the perfect position to do this and to do that all-important heavy loading that we've come to realize is really important when you want to get those stubborn calves to grow. As always, bonus tip for you calf knots out there, make sure you stay in that bottom position for about 4 seconds to take away the ballistic advantage that the Achilles provides and force more of the calf muscle to do the work. And I promise you'll thank me, and not just that, you'll find that it belongs up here as well in the best of the best category. Now when it comes to building a bigger chest, obviously pressing is going to be a large part of that equation. However, it's not the complete equation, because for you to get complete chest development, at some point you're going to have to adduct your arms, as we talked about. And for me, what better machine is there than a cable crossover? And what's nice is you don't have to just do this in the typical horizontal position. If you want to target more of your lower chest, then go from a high to low crossover. If you want to target more of your upper chest, then go from a low to high crossover. The versatility provided by the adjustment of the handles, combined with the fact that you have a safe stretch position that doesn't compromise the health of your shoulder, is the reason why the cable crossover really has to be part of a complete training program because of the unique benefits it provides. So when you look around my gym, you won't find a lot of machines here. But there is one that I specifically put in this gym for one very specific reason. Because I think it's the best way to train your back, and it's the lat pull down. See, when I'm looking for vertical lat exercises, this machine is the one that makes it most accessible to every single person. Yeah, the pull-up is an amazing way to do this, but it's not as accessible because a lot of people have a hard time doing the pull-up. But if I sit down in a lat pull-down machine, I could do that vertical lat training in a scalable manner by simply changing the place where I put the pin. Add to that fact that I could actually change the focus of my back training by simply changing the width that I'm grabbing the bar with, or actually change out the bar itself. It just becomes a very versatile option, and one that I believe is irreplaceable and belonging in that best of the best category when it comes to back training. So if you want a strong low back, as you should, then there's a machine out there that can actually do this for you in the perfect way. And we're talking about the reverse hyper. You see, a lot of us will actually use the hyperextension machine, but the issue with that is that you're training your back in a top-down approach, moving your torso backwards towards an extended hip. What I'd rather see you do is fix your torso in place like you do with this machine and then extend your hip backwards. Because what this will do is it will drive that low back strengthening through the glutes first, as it should be. You see, the low back is not designed to be the main provider of strength and stability to your torso. It's also the reason why they're some of the largest muscles in your body, providing you with great real estate and opportunity to strengthen them. If you have access to this hidden gem, by all means, you should do it. It certainly belongs at the top of the list here in the best of the best. And rounding out our list is an exercise that does a great job of rounding out that backside of yours. And we're talking about the hip thrust machine. And while we know we have a lot of great compound leg exercises to build our legs, they don't do a great job of providing resistance in that fully extended hip position like the hip thrust machine does. I mean, even a squat doesn't provide resistance when that hip is fully extended at the top. However, the one difference between this and the barbell variation of the exercise is it's just a lot easier for people to perform. If I think there's one big drawback to the barbell hip thrust, it's getting into and out of the exercise that makes a lot of people forego the exercise in the first place. This exercise machine will not allow you to do that. As a matter of fact, it's going to make it really simple as long as your gym has one. It belongs in the best of the best category. If you're wondering what the best chest exercises are from best to worst, I've made that video for you here. If you're looking for an entire playlist of all the best to worst videos, you can find that one here. Guys, remember to click subscribe, turn on notifications, and also if you're looking for full programs, you can find them over at ATHLEAN-X.com. All right, guys, see you soon.